All right, hello YouTube, welcome back to the channel Carolina Crown. Today I'm going to knock out part 2 of your brake rotor assembly with your caliper and your bracket. I'm going to get a few tools together and I will be back. I'm sorry if I sound a little muffled. I am wearing a respirator mask because I've got some chemicals in here. They're just not too good to breathe in right here in this bucket, so I do apologize if I sound a little muffled. I'm going to try to talk louder so that you can understand what I'm saying. Like I said, I am wearing a respirator. Real quick, we got these from Quirk Parts on eBay. They're very expensive, but these are OEM Motorcraft brake rotors, which are the original 2 front, 2 back that would come on a CVPI from factory. Now, I know I said in part 1 that I was going to clean them up and put them back on the car, but what I actually decided to do is keep those as spares and just throw some brand new ones on this bad boy. So, going to go ahead and get these packages opened up real quick and get my tools assembled, and I will be right back. One thing I remember mentioning in my last video is this would probably be a good time to try to clean up your hub assemblies here, so you can just kind of go around it. You know, I live in the South, so obviously I don't have to worry about rust as much. But for places that do have a high amount of rust, it's probably a good idea to possibly use some rust dissolver or something of the sort and begin to clean off the hub assembly. Super easy to do. You just want to get in here in these little nooks and crannies and just kind of clean up some of that nasty gunk, okay? So we're going to try to get up in there and just clean off what we can. All right, once you got your hub assembly all cleaned up, and it doesn't have to be flawless and beautiful, guys. It's a hub assembly, okay? There's going to be dirt and debris caked on this sucker. It is what it is. Just make sure it's rust-free. If you're up north, you'll have a lot of rust and stuff in here. Your splash shield may also have some rust and debris on it, and this is also a good time to look at your upper control arm and your lower control arm, as well as your sway bar and your tie rod. It's a good time to look at all that stuff. Just inspect it, make sure it's rust-free, make sure it's looking good and all that good stuff. Have your tools set out. Right here we've got a torque wrench. Guys, I'm going to go ahead and tell you before I even get started. This is super, super important. Make sure, do not fuck around with your brakes, guys. You can mess around with other things, like if you don't want to torque your spark plugs down appropriately, which would be about 18 foot-pounds. If you don't want to torque down your coils or your oil drain plug, that's fine. You don't have to torque those. You don't have to be extra like I am. But when it comes to your brakes, guys, please take this seriously. Please torque down this stuff. If you don't have a torque wrench, don't do brake work, okay? This is very serious, and it could be deadly, okay? I've heard horror stories of people riding down the roads and not torquing down their brake bolts enough, and the brake caliper falls off. They lose braking ability, and, you know, obviously, yes, you still have your parking brake. Worst case scenario, you can still put that on and stop the car, but if you're freaking out, don't know what you're doing, you don't have this stuff torqued down the way it's supposed to, your caliper falls off and you can't brake, guess who's going to end up in a tree or worse? Hits another car, kills somebody, what have you. Please make sure that you follow these recommendations once I get to that point, okay? And I will explain the torque settings on each bolt when we get to that setting. All right, guys, so here they are. These are going to be the brake rotors, okay? Here's your part number if you're interested in getting one. I know this little sentence down here at the bottom makes you kind of squirm. It does me too, but you know what? What's made in the United States anymore, right? So here's your OEM Motorcraft brake rotor. We're going to go ahead and get this sucker unboxed, and then we're going to install it on our hub assembly, okay? I recommend, if you can, change out your brake rotors at least every 100,000 miles. They can last longer, obviously, but it's always a good deal to do that. I know a lot of people will show you on YouTube, you take your finger and rub up and be like, oh, you know, there's a lip. Yeah, well, if you change it out every 100,000 miles and you also change your brake pads when you're supposed to, you're not really going to have to worry about this. It's a good rule of thumb to change them out every 100K. And what is that really, guys? 100,000 miles takes a long time to get. It's not that much money to waste. You're not really blowing money, you're just keeping your vehicle maintained, okay? Without further ado, let's get this thing unboxed and we'll slide it on. And voila, there's your brake rotor, okay? Now we're wearing gloves because this is very important. You don't want to get your Okay, so humans obviously have oily hands. The oil on your hands can sometimes interfere with the brake pads catching and doing the job they're supposed to do. So we've got gloves on today to do this job. So we're simply going to remove this brake rotor from here. We're going to have to take it out of this package. And this is simply going to slide on this car like so. Okay, there it is. And yes, they are supposed to be black like this from factory. The reason why you see that your rotors have turned silver, matching the rest of this, is because, well, the paint has wore off, okay? The paint has wore off because of the excessive amount of heat that's generated by the brakes themselves when those pistons push and the pads hit the rotor. It generates a lot of heat, guys. So obviously this paint is not going to be on the rotor after it's been used for, say, 15, 20,000 miles. Oh, the paint's going to be gone. The next thing you're going to want to do is start to input your bracket, okay? So when you have your bracket, and you can actually take the pads out for this part, it'd probably be best if you did that. Set your pads over here to the side. I'm going to pull this one out as well. There we go. Go ahead and set your pads over here to the side, okay? We're going to go ahead and place our bracket back on. Now, whenever you're putting the bracket back on, it's going to fit this way, okay? Exactly the way I left it off. Make sure that you have it aligned correctly where it's supposed to go. And you will feel when you're in line of exactly where it's supposed to go. Make sure to line up this hole with your bracket. Now, it's good having a bolt out, and I'm having to hold my camera with one hand and record with the other, to go ahead and start feeding it through there. And this will hold the bracket on here. This is the very important part where we're about to get into torque specs. So, hang tight 1 second. I'm going to go ahead and thread one of these bolts, and we'll be back to discuss the torque specs. Okay, so I was able to feed one of the bolts in there. Now, I'm pretty confident that nobody in this world is going to be as crazy as I am and follow the Ford recommendation all the way through. But yes, I even bought brand new set of 4 for the front bracket bolts because it's got new thread locker on there. Now, I realize you can go out and buy these. You can buy a thread locker and put it on the bolt yourself and just reuse the old bolts. But the Ford maintenance guide actually says to replace the bolts themselves every time they're removed from the vehicle. Now, is that a little excessive? Yes, but you know what? Screw it. We're going to follow it to a T. We're going to do this right, guys. So, we have our bottom bolt right here being fed into our knuckle that's attaching to the bracket. This is your knuckle. This is your bracket. You're just screwing that bolt in there so it's snug. Now, we're going to remove one more brand new bolt. And we're also going to feed this through the top. Look how nice and blue that is. Brand new bolt from Ford, right? OEM spec, straight from Ford. We're going to find where, let me zoom out real quick. We're going to find where that little hole is right here. And we're going to feed this bolt through here. And we're going to screw it so that it's attaching itself to the bracket. Okay, guys, now as you can see from a zoomed out perspective, we have both of our brand new caliper bracket bolts installed, okay? You're going to use an 18 millimeter socket and ratchet and put it over here and just begin to tighten it up. That's all we're going to do here. Okay, guys, so as you can see, both the top and the bottom brand new bracket bolts have been installed, okay? Now, here's where it gets very, very important. Utilize one of these bad boys. I'm going to do this off camera, okay, because it takes a lot of effort. It's something that I'm having a hard time doing with one hand, and I cannot do it. Use that normal ratchet to get this down as tight as you can with your hand, okay? Once you have these tightened down with your hand by ratchet, as tight as you can get them, the appropriate spec on your torque wrench is going to be 118 foot-pounds of torque. I'll repeat that again, 118 foot-pounds. That is stout, baby. So it's something that I cannot do with one hand and the camera in the other. So I'm going to be doing this project off camera. But your respective torque wrench, obviously mine goes up to 150 foot-pounds. Whichever one you have, just make sure it's capable of pushing out 118 foot-pounds, which would be about 120 foot-pound maximum. Make sure you have a torque wrench that can do that and set it to that at this time in the video. I'm going to go ahead and begin torquing these down. Remember, you can still use that interchangeable 18 millimeter socket that you used on your ratchet. Just attach it with a torque wrench. All right. The bolts have officially been torqued down to 118 foot-pounds each. This sucker is not going anywhere. It's on there, boo. At this point, and I think it goes without saying, I didn't have to show you the installation process of this. You can just put your brake pads back on, guys. It's as easy as just line up these holes and slide the pad back on both sides, and you're done. So your entire bracket assembly is now finished and installed in your car, as well as your rotors. The next step up is to grab your calipers and slide them over your pads here. So we'll get to that real quick now. Now, your caliper, pick it up, slide it on just like I just showed you. And make sure that your boots, your guide pins are lined up just right with the caliper bolts we're about to put in. Once you make sure everything's lined up, top and bottom, then you can simply grab your caliper bolts. Now, these are the smaller bolts, and they're going to just fit up in here in the top, okay? And you can start really easily by make sure your boot's lined up with it, like I said. And then you can just slide it in there and screw it in. Now, once that one's in there, do the same thing for the bottom one as well. Make sure it's lined up with that boot. And you should be able to just guide it on in there. Now, once these are screwed in place, we're going to whip out our torque wrench again. And the appropriate setting for your caliper bolts is 27 foot-pounds of torque. Once again, 27 foot-pounds of torque. Let's go ahead and knock that out. All right, guys, and here's your finishing results. Bracket, caliper, rotors installed. 118 foot-pounds bracket, 27 foot-pounds caliper bolt, and now your front brakes are finished. Let's discuss the rear brakes. Now, of course, I haven't put them on there yet. You see those little pins sitting on the floor down there? Those are your rear caliper bolts. The appropriate torque spec for putting those on is not 27 foot-pounds, it is 20 foot-pounds. 20 foot-pounds rear, 27 front, brackets, 118. Now, what we're not going to do in this video is we're not going to install the wheel because I have some more work I wanted to do and some more cleaning before I put them back on there. But once you install the wheel back on here, the appropriate specs for the lug nuts is going to be 90 foot-pounds of torque. All right. Thank you guys for watching part 2 so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys, all the people who subscribed to the channel. I'm having a blast, a lot of fun. I appreciate all these new people coming in here and watching my stuff. Want to give a real quick shout out to Pierce. That's my boy. If you want to check him out, he's on Love What You Drive. He's up in New Jersey area, so if anybody knows him, give him a shout out. Anybody want to check out Love What You Drive, check that out too. That's a really good channel showing off Crown Vics all over the country. Who knows, maybe one day I'll be on the channel myself if I go up to New Jersey at some point to see my buddy. So, thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one.